Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Please subscribe to the show. Aston Villa have started the season with some big wins, but also a couple of big losses. Today, I'm joined by football journalist, the excellent Sam Tighe, to review the start of the season and look ahead to Villa's tour of Europe. Sam, welcome back to All Villa, No Filler.
Oh, finally.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of months, Frankie. Did I offend you last time? Goodness
Yeah.
me.
I was waiting for a hot day, you see. It hasn't been a hot day for about 2 months. So, because we seem to always record on very, very hot days.
We do,
but,
yeah. We seem to enjoy the sight of each other looking very sweaty. I remember
yeah.
by the end of the last show that we did, we were both like that. So it's probably going to be the same today.
Yeah.
England, huh?
And that's just the fear of talking about Villa. It gets you sweaty, doesn't it? But anyway, so look, as I said, Villa have started the season a bit of a mixed bag. How would you assess Villa's start to the season?
Don't know. It's I've been sat here trying to figure out if basically are we any good? And I don't know the answer because obviously there have been more wins than losses, and there have been some big wins, as you say, but the losses really stick out for the wrong reasons. The scoreline either way always seems to be pretty comprehensive, which is weird. Like Villa haven't really played a close game yet. They've either trounced somebody or been trounced.
Yeah.
Obviously, the wins have come against, I think we have to accept, weak opposition. Everton are clearly very poor.
Yeah.
And Burnley are clearly very poor. They're a better footballing side than Everton, but they're significantly more naive off the ball.
Yeah.
And played into Villa's hands there and played into the hands of a team with just superior quality and more experience. And of course, the Hibernian games are even easier than the Everton games. So what can you take from that? It's very hard to say. You feel like you want to take more from the losses. And I accept mitigating circumstances. I accept that Anfield and St. James's Park are exceptionally difficult venues to play football in. And I also accept that a key injury in defence in both games early on destabilised the team to a point that it is very difficult to recover from. But the early goals and the reshuffling and the consequent collapse, the pressing issues, the highline issues, like it's hard to look at it, isn't it? And say that you're feeling particularly confident about Villa right now when they come up against anybody that is of equal or superior quality to them, which is definitely not the hallmark of Unai Emery's Aston Villa last season, because the defensive record, no matter who Villa played against, was pretty spectacular. And of course, Villa were the ones that went over to Anfield and finished off that Liverpool win streak once Trent had moved into midfield. Villa were the ones that stopped that. It was innovative, it was solid, it was composed. We simply have not seen that so far in those two games.
And there have been a lot of injuries to start the season. Obviously Tyrone Mings got that knee injury, which could put him out for the season. Buendia, same. Moreno's out, Ramsey's out. How impactful do you think those injuries have been and will continue to be?
Yeah, I mean, losing your entire left side is pretty tough, isn't it? And the left side was fantastic last season. Obviously Moreno really emerging as the kind of piston-like presence at left back, where the formation kind of swung around and tried to give him space to play into and to run into with the ball. He was the one that was getting into the box. He was providing cutbacks and crosses and joining up the play. And obviously Ramsey's Ramsey. Like, the big difference, obviously, in a game at Anfield or a game, against Newcastle here this season compared to last is, you remember how good Ramsey was in the win against Newcastle at Villa Park? Like, when Mings was punching those passes into him and he was able to sort of step inside into the half space, receive the ball, body off someone, turn and go, and create that transitional moment. Villa really lacked that. They kind of got steamrolled a little bit at St. James's Park in midfield and again at Anfield. And it's easy to look at the qualities that Ramsey brings on the half turn and the physical like running that he's got and ball carrying and think, well, yeah, that's really what was missing. But it cannot be the only excuse for what we saw at Anfield, which was a lack of pressure up front, which gave Trent Alexander-Arnold room to get his head up and time to get his head up. And then, of course, room in behind. He's got high line plus no pressure. It's suicidal stuff. We all know this. And you've got Darwin, after watching what he did against Newcastle the week before against Dan Burn, just clipping that ball in behind and letting him chase it. And you've got the pace of Salah and you've got Luis Diaz on the switch, the cross ball. it was pretty mind-boggling stuff, wasn't it? So yes, impactful injuries. And I do put the Newcastle game down to trauma more than anything.
Yeah.
Because they lost Buendia on the eve of it, and then they lost Tyrone Mings, 20 minutes in. It's difficult to recover from. But by the point you get to Anfield, you've actually won 4 games of football.
Yeah.
And they're by significant margins. So I'm struggling to let them hide behind those excuses for that one, even if Carlos did obviously go off early.
Yeah, and I guess with the defense, I mean, it is weirdly now it's a defense that hasn't really ever played together very much. Carlos was out for a year effectively. Pau Torres is now coming in as a new signing. Ezri Konsa's there, his experience with Villa, but not really play with these other defenders that much. So it feels a little bit like Villa are. Maybe Emery himself is trying to work out what's the best with these guys. But Pau Torres, I guess, is the one who's come in with the big money signing. He's got a big name and looked exceptional, when Villa are on the ball and the more front-footed team. But in those 2 games, Newcastle, you have to give him some leeway in that, I think. But Liverpool, there was some causes for concern there. Do you agree with that?
100%, yeah. I mean, look, you know that I'm not Pau Torres' biggest fan. I'm sure you and other people listening or watching will have seen the YouTube video that I did on Tifo when he signed, and I was like, not sure. But obviously, I still wanted to succeed and get behind him. And yes, I will give him basically a buy for Newcastle because he was on the bench for a reason. Right. Emery did not want to play Pau Torres in that game. He either wasn't ready, wasn't fit for the game in terms of the stylistic matchup, which I think proved to be the case. Or just didn't want to chuck him in at St James's Park on the opening day. Like, that is difficult. It's really difficult. But of course, he was forced to put him in, and it went badly. Fine, we'll just draw a line under that one, and we'll just forget about that. Even a critic like myself of his can say that's not fair to start bashing him for that. But Anfield was a bit dodgy. They set some pressing traps for him that he walked straight into blindfolded. Obviously loses the ball in the box for the corner that turns out to be Jobajloy's first goal, the opening goal. I mean, again, hell of a strike. What the XG on that must be minuscule. But he creates a problem for Villa there. And I don't think Villa are going to be that strong at defending corners without Tyrone Mings this season. I think it's going to be a problem. So if Villa are handing out corners, then they're making a rod for their own back, and Torres has done that. You look back at the Burnley game, and he's stepping forward with the ball, beating a man-to-man press and striding out and then firing passes through. He's pivotal to the ball progression. Yeah. And you look at Liverpool, and he's kind of got bullied, hasn't he? Yeah. He's walked into some pressing traps, and physically he's really, really struggled. And to be honest, the Burnley goal that Villa conceded, he wasn't covering himself in glory for that, was he? So even in a very strong win, a very comprehensive win, he's had a moment there where you're like, oh, I'm not too sure about that.
Do you have any fears that the Mings injury might be a bit of a sliding doors moment? I promise people listening to this that it is going to get more positive, but believe me, we're just assessing some of these. But with the Mings injury, is it a slight sliding doors moment? And do you wonder whether maybe Torres would have been more proactively used in like the Burnley Everton games when Villa are more front-footed, and then maybe when it comes to the Liverpool aways and the Newcastle aways, maybe Mings would have been the player who starts those, and Torres is a sort of more of a bench option?
It's a very good question because it's now impossible to answer.
Yeah.
So I like to believe the answer is yes. However, it does not appear that Unai Emery cares about whether or not this Villa backline has what I would consider to be the requisite level of physicality and aggression.
Right.
Because in response to the Pau Torres, in response to the Tyrone Mings injury, they did very little or nothing for 10 days. And then right at the last moment, decided to go and get Clement Lenglet as cover. Mm-hmm. Now, Lenglet, he profiles pretty similarly to Pau Torres in some ways.
Yeah.
The only that he's slower than Pau Torres, but he is good on the ball. He is past his best, but he's still been at a Barcelona level. And there was a time where Lenglet and Piqué, I mean, I watched them play together in a partnership in a Clasico when Barcelona won 3-0. Like, he's no slouch. Yes, he was a late addition and it was a needs must and it's cover. But like this guy brings the European experience that we've been saying this squad lacks. Yeah. Like, this is actually quite a smooth move. However, he's quite slow and he is relatively timid. So he is not in any way a Tyrone Mings replacement. The only similarity they really hold is that they're both left-footed. So in opting for Longley as the kind of Mings cover for the season, again, you're eschewing the idea that you need to get bigger and more physical and better at defending the box. And you're leaning into the idea that actually you're prioritising that build-up play and prioritising progression from the back line. So do I actually think that Emery had an eye on Mings there as let's sub him in for those games and then let's bring Torres in for when you dominate against? But I can't get behind that idea as much as I want it to be true, because I just feel like Emery has shown no courtesy for physicality in the line. He's almost gone, I don't need that, which I disagree with.
Yeah, I think particularly in the Premier League, I think physicality is just something of a must, really, isn't it? It is just that type of a league. And, looking at it, I mean, the game I sort of have one eye on, really. I know we have Crystal Palace next, Warsaw as well in Europe. We'll talk about Europe in a minute. But Palace is probably a game where I think Villa will try to be more front-footed. I certainly have some fears about Eberechi Eze and, but I'm confident Villa can go into that game and, take the lead there, really. But Chelsea away. Now, I know Chelsea aren't very good, and I did watch quite a lot of their game against Forest. And Forest basically won that by sitting back and hitting them on the break. Villa, I don't think really are going to want to do that. I think Villa are going to try and take the game to them. And, it worked last season when we beat them 2-0. But again, do you think, with a game like Chelsea where the opposition team are probably going to have more of the ball and a bit more attacking and players who can run in behind, do you think Villa might need to look at what happened at Newcastle and Liverpool and maybe change it up a little bit tactically?
I think so, yeah. I mean, we sort of touched on it already, but playing the high line and then lacking pressure up top is a bit of a death sentence in this league. I mean, it's a death sentence almost anywhere, to be fair, in football. And when you consider the opposition attacker profiles, like Nicholas Jackson is very fast. And he's a great two-way player because he's really good at taking the ball in and bringing his attacking midfielders into play. But he can also just take the lid off the defense and just run in behind. He can just spin and go. He's that kind of player. Raheem Sterling is an exceptional footballer at running in behind, an exceptional footballer at carrying the ball aggressively and quickly at players. So Mudryk is one of the quickest players in the Premier League. Like I look at the cast of attackers that you would come up against there, and I would say, can they do what Newcastle and Liverpool did? Absolutely. Absolutely they can. So you do one of two things. You either drop the line and you become a little bit more reactive, move into kind of like a low block or a mid block and just sit a little bit deeper on the pitch and remove that space in behind. Or you actually be active and press from the front and protect your high line, which we just haven't really quite seen in those two games. We've seen Villa just let the high line get exposed. There's got to be a reaction of one sort or the other there. It's not as essential against Palace. I would agree with you there. But for the Chelsea game, which Villa should have an eye on and say, I think we can win this game if we play well.
Yeah. There's
got to be an adjustment. There just has to be. And this was the complaint at Liverpool. We saw all this happen last year at Anfield.
Yeah.
Villa were the team to stop Trent for the first time. Liverpool won 8 games in a row.
Yeah.
And then Villa went to Anfield and got a point. They were the first team to stop Liverpool in their new alignment. They planned for it very specifically. John McGinn, Ollie Watkins, really specific roles in pressure on Fabinho and Trent. Did not let them exploit those gaps. Where was that last week? I hope to see it against Chelsea. Otherwise, it could be another difficult game.
Completely. That press in the front. I wonder if Ramsey coming back by that point, hopefully, might add something, and maybe Mings could move out right, or McGinn could move out right. Just something along those lines. But, we've sort of focused on some of the frustrations, I guess, and some of the more the questions, I guess, about that have been raised. But, have there been some real positives to you as well? I mean, there have been, amongst that, some really good wins as well, and some really excellent football play going forward. I mean, so what to you are the positives, would you say?
So Ollie Watkins bagging a hat-trick on Villa's first European game in 13 years was absolutely awesome. Huge smile on my face to see that. I've seen lots of good things from Moussa Diaby. He does at least 4 things a game where I go, you are exactly as good as we hoped you'd be.
Yeah.
And, coming from the scars of Leon Bailey, that's a really important early marker to set down.
Yeah.
I think Douglas Luiz has largely been very, very good. I think it's between him and Ezri Konsa for me that have basically, I think in every game I've I've seen so far. And I appreciate Conte made the big error against Newcastle, but I look at them in most games and I think, yep, you're up to it. You're tuned in. You're okay. I've had sporadic concerns about almost everybody else for one reason or another. Be it Pau Torres' physicality, be it Luka Dean's lack of speed. It could be the fact that Boubacar Kamara has been very up and down. Watkins did nothing off the ball at Anfield, and I do not understand why. McGinn looked really uncomfortable on the left against Newcastle. Like, I've got a whole long list, Frankie. But for Douglas Luiz and Ezri Konsa, I'm very happy with them. Like, I'm very happy with Konsa's like suitability for 3 or 4 different roles according to what Unai Emery wants to do. And I'm really happy with Doug. Like, he's one of my favorite. He's just fantastic, isn't he? I don't need to tell anybody that. But yeah, those would be the real positives that I can draw from that. And McGinn against Burnley was exceptional.
Yeah, he was exceptional against Everton as well. I went to the Everton game where McGinn, I just came out of it like, when he's on it, when he's in really top form, he looks like an absolutely fantastic player. And I said after, I was like, if Alex Ferguson was still in charge at Man United, I was like, that's exactly who we'd go for. Just somebody that level of like ability and probably could reach a level higher than a lot of people anticipate. Because look at the players who won trophies under Alex Ferguson, and I think McGinn would just be one of them. But Moussa Diaby as well. I remember talking to you about him and you saying no complaints with this signing. And again, watching him.
I'd complained about everything, hadn't I, at that point? Pretty much. I'd done that video about, my concerns over Villa's signing. So I just wanted to, again, you try and balance it where possible. Like, Diaby is an exceptional footballer. I was like, I have no complaints here. He's exactly what Villa need. He's a brilliant, brilliant player. The contrast between him and Bailey, the way Diaby can spin out of pressure and ride contact versus how Leon Bailey finds contact and just hits the deck every time. Is that the contrast is so significant, and it's so important for Villa there. And, Bailey steps on. I don't need to keep ratting on him, but like, he's obviously frustrated us all, and he steps onto the pitch, doesn't he, at Liverpool due to the injury reshuffle. And do you know that weird thing he did with his legs, where he immediately lost the ball? He tried to sort of turn out of 2 players pressing him, and he looked like he was on ice skates, and he just kind of fell over and lost it. And I was like, Diaby is now making this even more unbearable because Diaby is like, is touch perfect. Yeah.
And it feels like he's balanced out the team. The left-hand side was where all of Villa's sort of danger came from last season. It feels like, Cash scored a couple playing front right. Bailey scored against Everton. And it feels like the two of them have come alive because Diaby's there making runs and something to work with.
So what happens when Moreno and Ramsey are reunited on the left and Diaby is providing that balance on the right, just tucking into that half space? I mean, like it could be an attack and a midfield that is very, very difficult for opponents to figure out where to even start with. In a similar way, I would argue that Villa experienced at Anfield, where it's not just Trent now. You've got Szoboszlai running around like a maniac and also providing real quality between the lines. You've got Alexis picking passes. You've got Darwin over the top. You've got Salah into feet. The variety to that attacking unit is now so much that it's very difficult to know where to start.
Yeah.
And you might plug one hole and then another one just springs open.
Yeah.
And when Ramsey and Moreno are back, I do get that feeling that will be similar with Villa.
Yeah. And Szoboszlai was really good, I thought, against Villa. Just Liverpool, generally, their press and their pressing structure was really impressive. But, looking ahead to Europe, Villa have made it through, beat Hibs. We're
it's a close
back.
One.
Yeah, we're back, baby. So, the draw, we've got Alkmaar, Lechia Warsaw, and Zielinski of Mostar in Bosnia. What do you feel about the draw?
Well, I don't know very much about 2 of the teams, which is the joy of Europe and the joy of the Conference League. Like I cover European football for a living, but I absolutely just don't know very much about teams from Poland and Bosnia, and you'll just have to forgive me for that. I know plenty about AZ Alkmaar, and I know that they are a significantly weaker team than they were last year. So I think Villa fans may have got a little bit spooked, potentially, if you saw that obviously been drawn against the team that finished in the semi-finals last year.
Yeah.
And were knocked out in a very close game against West Ham. But they've sold like 5 key players over the summer. And obviously with in the way that those kind of clubs do in that kind of pecking order. They reinvest in youth and they wait for that youth to then grow into a better player, and then they probably sell it on again. But when you do that, when you get to the end of that cycle and you sell 5 players, you are immediately a worse team. Mm-hmm. So this is not going to be the AZ Alkmaar that gave West Ham a lot of problems. You know, they don't have, you know, Rangers who went to Milan. They don't have Hadzidiakos, who for some reason went to Cagliari. They don't have Jesper Karlsson, who moved on as well at left wing. They do have a couple of good players still, but like it's a significantly lesser force. So it's a group I would expect Villa to win. And I'm loving the look of match day 1. Obviously, away is perfect, I think. And it's to Legia Warsaw as well, which should be a good one. And I expect to win there too.
Yeah, what a fantastic away day. I mean, Alkmaar would be an interesting one after what happened with the Knowlesy and the West Ham fans last year.
Yeah. I'm staying away from that one.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be Villa's version of Knowlesy. I don't think I've got the build for it. But yeah, Europe is fantastically exciting, and just like seeing even the Hibs game recently, where Villa, you know, went into it 5-0 up, but that full house and the under the floodlights and the noise, and it took me back to, you know, because you know a lot of Villa fans I saw, you know, on Twitter just saying, you know, they hadn't seen an away atmosphere like that as well, and it just took me back to think, God, there are a lot of Villa fans now who, you know, are old enough and don't remember us playing, you know, the heady heights of Rapid Vienna, and, but you know,
Ajax at home is the one that I would always point to, not Rapid Vienna. I mean, I was at the game. I was at the playoff loss at home,
right?
Which was just obviously devastating.
Yeah.
So that sucks. I remember the banner they unfurled at the top of the stand, which was "Your Nightmare Returns," and it was true. I think Villa have come a long way since then, but yeah, that certainly had me going. And the truth be told, I was like convinced that we were going to lose the playoff round, and I was like, it's going to be ruined again. But obviously, Hibbert made short work of Hibernian, so 6 more at least. That's good.
Yeah, can't wait. And just to sort of sum it up, I guess, you know, looking ahead, you know, there's a few questions, but there's also quite a few positives as well from the start of the season. I guess, like, looking ahead, like, how do you feel about the season now, sort of overall? You know, if you could sort of project, you know, where you think it might go.
So, while I'm obviously frustrated with the big losses and the performances that have been attached to those, not being right on it in the Premier League doesn't bother me that much, because I think the reality of Villa's season was always going to boil down to this: get through the group in Europe, get to February, and look at the draw and be like, we can win this. And like, Villa are currently the bookies' favourites to win the Europa Conference League. Now, there's going to be some teams that drop down from the Europa League. I mean, it may even include West Ham. Probably not, but you never know. You never know who comes down, and it will cloud the matter. However, right now, as Villa see it, should be getting through the group and eyeing up winning this trophy. If that's ever a realistic possibility, there is going to be a point in February or March where Unai Emery goes, I do not have the resources to go full frontal in Europe and full frontal in the Premier League. And he's going to have to make a decision. He's going to have to make a decision on what his priority is. And I think everyone will be behind him if he goes Conference League. Now, don't do what Martin O'Neill did and send the children to Russia and then have to buy everyone dinner. Like, we'll all understand if you go with the Conference League. So I think Villa's ceiling in the Premier League this season is 8th or 9th, and they might end up finishing 10th. But if that leads to a run at a trophy, Europe or domestic, everyone will be fine with that, because realistically, how do Villa take the next step in their progression? It's to win a trophy.
Yeah,
the top 7 is even harder to get in this year than it was last year, and we got in like incredible and barely believable circumstances. So, being slightly off the pace and still figuring it out and starting a little bit slowly doesn't bother me that much, because I think Villa's biggest games this year will fall on Thursdays, and I think they'll come in February and March. And the Premier League, well, we can't obviously discount it. It's clearly the bread and butter. There'll be a time in early 2024 where there's a decision made where that is then the second best thing in the calendar. So that's how I feel.
Right, interesting. Yeah, intrigued to see how this all sort of pans out for sure. And there could be some tough away days coming up, and let's say we get a Besiktas and or a Fenerbahce and a really loud, tough atmospheres, and I could see that if let's say we got through the group, got over to February, and you sort of eyes on games like that, it's I could see that taking precedence, to be honest, and being a real
100%
big focus. But yeah, interesting how it all goes. But so, Sam, it's always excellent to talk to you. I love chatting to you about football generally, and particularly about the Villa. But for those who maybe not sure about where your work is, where can we find you online?
All sorts of places now. Yeah, I'm a freelance writer and journalist and broadcaster. So Sky Sports, ESPN, Tifo on YouTube. A few other places here and there, whoscored.com as well. All sorts. Whoever offers me work, that's the life of a freelancer. You know that, Frankie. So on Twitter, it's STighe Football, Tighe, and same on Threads. Does anyone use that anymore? And Instagram as well, if you do want to follow me.